The sky hasn't been blue in years. It's a bruised, sulfurous bruise, noun, endless canopy of ash and ember that bleeds into every sunrise and sunset. I can still remember mornings when the horizon was soft, a pale gradient of pink and gold. That memory feels like someone else's dream. Below the fractured sky, the world is unrecognizable. Rivers lie dry, or poisoned once mighty currents, reduced to cracked clay and rusted skeletons of barges. I crossed what used to be the Ohio River last spring, a wide expanse of fissured earth. Its bed so parched that I could dig a shallow hole with my boot and taste the salt of dust instead of water. Where dams once held back torrents, now they stand broken, half buried in sand drifts. The cities, too, have collapsed into ruin. Steel spires lean at impossible angles, their windows long shattered by windstorms that scream through empty streets. I walked through downtown Detroit and found a forest growing through a collapsed parking garage, saplings 2 meters tall, roots curling around engine blocks and torn upholstery. In Chicago, the Loop is a canyon of lightless towers. The CTA tracks dangle above a chasm of overgrown weeds and scuttling rats. Concrete and glass have surrendered to rot and reclamation. Bridges and highways or tories of the old world have snapped where floods or heat warped their structure. I once followed Route 66 for days, only to come upon a stretch so melted that the asphalt had become a taffy-like mess. My lonely truck slipped on its hips. All I could do was backtrack through. Cactus and TUMBLEWEED. Climate change's ferocity reshaped the seasons into nightmares. Summers last 8 months, with daytime temperatures that peel skin from bone. Winters are sudden frost jets, sub-zero nights that freeze flesh to steel within minutes. Tornadoes spawn like corporate franchises, touching down in places that never knew wind. It rained fire last autumn embers, drifting from the sky like evil snowflakes, setting prairie grass ablaze in an instant. Humanity fares no better. The government dissolved when the food rations stopped arriving, when the last military unit prioritized its own survival over orders. There are no elections anymore, no police with real authority, no schools teaching children to read. Instead, we have survivor enclaves, small clusters of ragged tents behind miles of barricades, guarded by rusted pickups mounted with salvaged machine gun turrets. Some groups share what little they have. Most loot, blackmail, or kill for scraps. Rogue factions roam the wasteland in convoys of stolen SUVs, panels scored with gang symbols and the words, blood, water, or new exodus. They trade human lives like currency. Rumor says some have resorted to making slaves of migrants' weak souls tricked by lies into camps, only to vanish under cover of night. Scavengers drift from settlement to settlement, ghost-like. We call them vultures. They pick bones clean, canned goods, batteries, even last year's solar panels. I once stood by and watched as a lone vulture pried open a neighbor's crate of seeds, hoping to grow something green, and dumped them into his coat for sale at the next town. The only institutions that persist are the ones we build around fear. Sophie corridors exist, where patrols of armed survivors escort weary travelers in exchange for a share of their supplies. If you try to slip past, they shoot first. Ask questions, never. Mercy died the day water became gold. Everywhere, the shriek of generators punctuates the silence. Metal generators, jury-rigged turbines, solar cells in dire disrepair. Radio remains a lifeline. Scratchy broadcasts that remind us we aren't alone, even when the signal fades in static. When I flip the dial, I can catch a sputtering broadcast from an old friend 200 miles away, talking about a rumor of a hidden reservoir or a restored satellite dish that might pick up international frequencies again. It's hope in its purest, cruelest form, tantalizing whispers that may lead to salvation or straight into an ambush. Wildlife has changed, too. The corvids are sickly, their feathers tinged with chemical sheen. Small mammals scuttle under the dust, mutated by toxins we'll never fully trace. A buck wandered into our camp last month, its antlers twisted in grotesque shapes. One side twice the size of the other before collapsing, its eyes glazed and empty. The planet is healing itself in strange ways, sprouting hardy weeds and fungus that feed on the wreckage of cement and steel. Sometimes I find mushrooms growing out of a car tire, or vines reclaiming a shopping mall nature's stubborn reclamation project, indifferent to our suffering. And yet, with all this death and decay, I still see the glimmer of something stubborn. In the dark, my generator hums, my antenna quivers in the wind. I have a microphone and a voice, a handful of batteries, and a single aim: to keep the story alive. To remind anyone out there that the world might be broken, but our will to endure isn't. Because even here, under an ashen sky, in a land of cracked rivers and rusted towers, we cling to hope. And sometimes, when the wind is right, I swear, I can hear it breathing back. Asterisk. I am Morgan Reyes, and I've been alive for 32 of the 50 years this world has been burning. I can feel the pulse of the generator under my feet, the low thrum of its metal heart, keeping these walls from silence. This booth, once the newsroom for a small local station, has become my sanctuary and my prison. Through its dusty windows, I scan the gray horizon, listening for storms and raiders and the soft betrayal of dead air. I was a reporter before the world cracked open. I chased stories of political scandals and climate protests, wrote human interest pieces about local gardens and neighborhood fairs. I believed in deadlines that used to mean paper at 6, not find water by midnight, or die. My family Ana and little Santiago were my reason to believe. I had a home with floors that creaked at sunrise and a lawn where we planted tomatoes. Now, that house is rubble. That lawn is a field of sun-baked dirt. I have no one left to call home, except that battered microphone. Survival is the sum of 1,000 little choices. Morning, I pedal the bike generator for 2 hours, charging the batteries that power the transmitter. My legs burn, sweat soaks my shirt, but each rotation keeps our voices alive on the airwaves. I fill water jugs from the last surviving well. In the county, its walls propped up by beams scavenged from school bleachers. I ration every drop, a sip for drinking, a splash for my meager soup, a rinse for my wounds. I check the perimeter fences, tighten loose wire, listen for footsteps. In the dark, then I climb back into the booth and breathe into the mic. The archive of pre-collapse recordings, folk songs, children laughing, old news clips fills the hours when I have nothing new to report. Sometimes I play my daughter's favorite song, a lullaby she hummed to Santiago on stormy nights. I hear her tinny voice through crackling speakers, and for a moment, the ghost of a happier world flickers in my chest. But then the amplifier sputters, and I'm pulled back to this empty room. I keep going because the sky still trembles with electricity, because the vines outside are inching over broken concrete, because I believe someone, somewhere, might still be listening. Hope is a dangerous thing, fragile, easily shattered, but without it, I'd be just another husk roaming the wasteland. I've seen people give up, bodies left where they fell, hands clutching empty canisters. I refuse to be one of them. Hope drives me, yes, but so does responsibility. This frequency 93.5 FM, though no one can verify the number anymore, is a thread between pockets of survivors. A family hiding in an abandoned church picks up my signal when the wind is right. A caravan of refugees rolling west hears my voice crackle through their radio, giving them instructions to avoid a massive raiders camped near the old interstate. I offer them warnings, tips for purifying water, reminders to stop and rest before forging on. Sometimes, I imagine their faces in the static, hollowed cheekbones, hollower eyes, mouths pressed into grim lines. But they listen, and I speak, and that may be enough. I carry the weight of their expectation. I remember the night 4 months ago, when the signal went dead for 8 hours. My fuel cans were empty, and I couldn't pedal fast enough to charge the batteries. In that silence, a convoy diverted into the Badlands and never checked in again. I replay their voices on tape. Station, come in. Station, come in. But all I have is dead air. I blamed myself until I nearly broke. Now, I keep extra batteries hidden under a false floorboard and scavenge every solar panel I can find. Sometimes I'm tempted to give the world a better ending. I could end every broadcast with, "Let it end," pull the plug, and escape into the wilderness. But I know that word would spread. If I vanish, fear will follow. Structures will fall further. Hope, already stretched thin, will snap. So I stay. My body bears the scars of this life. The skin on my calves is leathered from bike pedals and tiny explosions of rusted metal when I fix turbines. My right shoulder clicks from cranking the generator. I lost the tip of my left index finger to a makeshift slicer when I cut fiber optic cables to reroute data lines. Infection nearly took my arm, but I nursed it with a poultice of crushed comfrey and honey eye. Still have my stash of honey from that rooftop garden I guarded last winter. That garden was raided. The honey confiscated. I keep a spoonful for emergencies hidden inside my jacket lining. Every spoonful is a prayer. Asterisk, I sleep in shifts 2 hours on, 2 hours off tucked behind sandbags, and a steel door that rattles when the wind howls. I dream of Anna tucking Santiago into bed. I wake with a gasp, heart hammering. I tape paper over my notebook. Don't cry on air, because if I let those tears slip into the mic, listeners will know that this old world stings more than the new one ever could. Yet, I allow myself small moments of tenderness. I talk to the wind chimes fashioned from tin cans on the balcony. "We're still here," I whisper when they ring. I address the abandoned cat who slinks into my shelter at dusk. I call her Luna and feed her scraps. She keeps the rodents at bay. I keep her company. In the soft glow of a single filament bulb, I trace the lines of her whiskers and remember what it is to care. My losses are the weights in my pockets. I carry a photograph edges curled with damp of our family at the county fair, smiling under a blue sky. I touch it before every broadcast. The image is a relic. My daughter's hair caught in the sun, her laugh frozen mid-candid. I hold the photo close, and for a moment, the world rights itself. Then I slide it into the mic stand and face the audience. I've met other survivors who call themselves the last of their towns. We exchange messages once or twice, then go silent, each of us guarding our secrets, our resources. Trust is lethal. Betrayal is common. I refuse to join a walled community. The promise of walls and ration cards always ends in bloodshed when supplies run low. I may be lonely, but I remain free. Free to speak truth. Free to wander. Free to fail without dragging innocence down with me. At night, I write. I record every broadcast in a battered notebook, timestamps and frequencies, names of convoys, coordinates of water sources. Someday, if someone finds these pages, they'll know we lived, we stumbled, we fought. I write about the cannibal migration, those desperate bands that roam the Midwest, preying on the unprepared. I keep my reports factual, sightings near the Mississippi, warnings not to travel barefoot, signs to look for crossed sticks at trail forks, abandoned packs smeared with blood. I refuse to sensationalize. Fear must be informed. Still, sometimes the horror seeps in. I wake after nightmares, my throat raw from screaming. I lick salt from my lips and wonder if my voice will ever hold a steady tone again. But dawn comes, and I pedal. I filter water. I align the antenna. I breathe into the mic. This is Morgan Reyes. You are listening to 93.5 FM. Stay safe. Stay alive. I do not know if I'll see another spring. I do not know whether the rains will ever return, or if the sky will crack open with blue. But I know this. While I can speak, I will. While these batteries hold a charge, They will power my voice. And while this voice is heard, no one will be truly alone. Because in the end, survival is more than blood and bone. It's the stories we keep telling. And mine is far from over. Asterisk. This is Morgan Reyes on 93.5 FM transmission timestamp 417. If you're hearing this, know that the world did not end last night, but it's closer than ever. I've been tracking the cannibal migration for the past week. It began as rumors, travelers vanishing along the old I-80 corridor, packs of them mauled and ransacked, leaving only shredded clothing and blood-soaked footprints in the dust. Survivors whispered of skeletal figures moving at twilight, scavenging the weak. But tonight, I'm within 20 clicks of their path. I can smell them on the wind like charred meat, carried across 1,000 miles of sun-baked plains. Asterisk. The drought is absolute. They say it's the worst in recorded history, a quarter century without a true rainy season. Average annual precipitation in the Midwest has plummeted by 65%, and groundwater tables have collapsed by 10 meters beneath what they were in 2025. The aquifers that once fed the Great Plains are now pustules of cracked clay and dead veins. Surface wells run bone dry. Hand-dug pits yield only salty brine that burns the tongue. Climate scientists, those who survived, calculate that temperatures here routinely spike above 52 degrees Celsius, 125 degrees Fahrenheit, for days on end. Evaporation rates outstrip any scant rainfall, so moisture simply never settles. Dust devils spiral like miniature tornadoes, stripping topsoil from empty fields. The very earth inhales and exhales heat. Any seed you plant dies within hours of germination. Without water, crops collapse. Livestock, when it can be found, sprawl in the shade of collapsed barns, carcasses strewn as mating lures for vultures. Entire herds vanish into the dust. Food prices soared until currency lost, meaning a single can of beans could buy safe passage across 3 states. In this vacuum of resources, humanity unravels. The cannibal migration is a tragic apex. Starving groups turning on each other and then on any travelers foolish enough to keep moving. Asterisk. Yesterday, at dusk, I spotted a small caravan approaching my outpost, a battered flatbed truck towing a makeshift water tank. 4 figures, 2 armed scouts, a woman slumped in the passenger seat, and someone lying in the bed, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. They parked 50 meters from my fence and called out with broken horns. I slipped outside, rifle in hand. The scouts raised their weapons, and for a beat I thought it would end in gunfire. Instead, they lowered their barrels. The woman introduced herself as Tara. Her voice cracked like old leather. They had scavenged enough diesel to limp this far, but nothing more. Their tank held 17 liters, 17 lifetimes in this desert. I offered them water in exchange for information. In the shack where I quartered the caravan, they hushed Tara's sobs and whispered of a new horde moving south from the old Nebraska sandhills. 1,000 souls, no, less than 1,000 bodies driving wheelchairs, handcarts, makeshift stretchers. They hunt people, they hunt livestock, they hunt children. They were my allies for an hour. I filled their tanks, patched their radiator leaks, offered battery cells for their cum rig. When they left at dawn, they handed me a map, scrawled on greasy paper marking the path of the migrating horde. Stay off the highways, they urged. They circle the interstates like vultures. Tonight, I remember their faces pressed into the mesh of my barbed wire fence, the gratitude in their eyes, the fear in their hearts. Allies mean little in the face of thousands, but every tip helps. Asterisk. The sky trembles. A heat wave came early this year, an augur of disaster. Temperatures soared above anything on record. 56 degrees Celsius, 133 degrees Fahrenheit at noon. The sun, a white-hot disk that bakes air into a furnace. I tracked it on my thermocouple logger, readings climbing at an unprecedented rate. 2 C per day for a week straight. The record from Piak, minus 49 degrees. Celsius shattered. Power grids collapsed. Even here at my off-grid station, my solar array scorched, my backup panels warped. The generator fights to spin, throttle pinned, when the heat subsides briefly around midnight, replaced by a wall of suffocating humidity. In meteorological terms, a heat index above 75 degrees Celsius triggers instant heat stroke. My sensors report dew points impossible to survive. Every drop of sweat that forms on my skin evaporates before it cools me, and yet the storms are the cruelest knock. In the past month, we've seen microbursts rip through the plains gusts, exceeding 160 kilometers per hour, turning my antenna mast into scrap within seconds. Then come the electrical storms, sheet lightning that flashes with the fury of 1,000 fireworks, fracturing the sky. The air smells of ionized ozone, like the end of days. Rain falls in torrents brief, monumental, and then gone, leaving gaping rivulets that carve new gullies in the cracked clay. My water traps overflow and spill into dust. The rush of it sounds like a nightmare I can't wake from. Asterisk every day. Survival shrinks to the next breath. Fuel costs more than food. Ammunition is rationed to 1 bullet per person per week. Water requires bartering away half your supplies. Food that doesn't spoil in the heat-dried insects. Protein bars laced with algae dastes of ash. Medical supplies are more precious than gold. A single dose of antibiotics can save a life or furnish a hostage ransom. Social order has collapsed into a brutal auction for essentials. Yesterday, I watched 2 men fight over a single-gallon jug. They punched through corrugated steel doors, hissed threats over nasal syllables, spilled the water on the floor in their frenzy. No paramedics came. No deputies arrested them. They left one dead, one writhing in blood, and the jug empty sitting between them. Asterisk if you're listening on a portable receiver. Know this. Dehydration kills faster than hunger. When ambient temperature exceeds 40 degrees Celsius, your body can lose up to 2% of its mass in sweat per hour. That translates to 2 liters of fluid lost every 60 minutes. You must replace at least half that hourly, preferably with a solution containing sodium and sugar to maintain electrolyte balance. I use ration packs. 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon powdered sugar per liter of salvaged water. If you lack sugar, a pinch of crushed tablet candy will suffice. When water is scarce, harvest dew. At night, place fabric or plastic sheeting on the ground. Clean tarps are best to elevate a corner over a cup or bottle and let condensation form. You can collect up to 200 milliliters per night under the right conditions. Solar stills work too. Dig a small hole. Place a container at the center. Cover the pit with plastic. Weigh down the edges with rocks, and put a small rock in the center above. The container so evaporated moisture drips inward. In full sun, you'll get 500 milliliters after 6 hours. As for heat, limit activity to dawn and dusk. When the sun climbs, rest in the coolest spot you can find. Oleander bushes, caves, buried cellars. Wear loose, light-colored clothing that covers your skin. A damp cloth over the back of the neck reduces core temperature. If you must travel by day, walk on shaded terrain. Pavement can reach 70 degrees Celsius. Clay dust holds less heat. Asterisk fuel for generators and vehicles is distilled from old oil. Drums, via makeshift retort systems dangerous, prone to explosion, yields a kerosene-like residue that clogs engines. I burn no more than 2 liters a day, just enough to run the transmitter and cool the food stores. Food itself is a patchwork of scavenged goods, protein pods salvaged from a collapsed biotech facility, freeze-dried mushrooms grown in a lab that once studied extremophiles, dehydrated insect patties, taste metallic, like swallowing iron filings, but they sustain. Then there's ammunition. Bullets cost more than bottled water. I fire only in dire emergencies. Last week, when the cannibals crept within 30 meters of the fence, their lanterns flickering like devil fire, I had 4 rounds left. I held my breath, prayed the barbed wire slowed them, and hoped the generator's hum masked my movements. They passed without noticing. Later, I found human hair snagged on the twisted wire, white, wispy, like the hair of a child. Asterisk 2 nights ago. The horde made camp on the far side of an abandoned feedlot. I drew them a map on the radio. Bypassed the cattle pens, enter through the broken fence at grid. Coordinate 37.8 by -97.2. Follow the irrigation canal. Move east at dawn. 2 caravans used that path, 50 souls, and they arrived here, unmolested. I monitored their arrival on the shortwave. Joyful shouts, children hugging legs, dogs barking, but then static gunfire and silence. I broadcast a warning immediately, but I was 10 minutes too late. All I could pick up were echoes of screams, and then a sputter of laughter. Every new broadcast, every new warning, carries responsibility. And every time I fail, people die. But if I stop broadcasting, nobody even has a chance. Asterisk tonight. I calibrate my sensors one last time. The anemometer spins at gale force gust warnings of 120 kilometers per hour. The humidity is set to plummet at sunrise dew. Point below zero means frost in mid-August. I can hear distant, thunder-likely localized spin-up tornado. I must secure the antenna before it buckles and takes my lifeline with it. As I bolt the mount, I think of Tara's caravan, of the 4 who left with hope, of the journalists I once outran, skeptical of climate change, who now walk this earth hungry, broken, begging for a drop of water. Of the cannibal horde beyond my fence, of their cries and cackles that echo across the plain when they make camp. Asterisk attention. All stations and travelers on westbound I-80. Your route is compromised. The main bridge at mile marker 312 has collapsed. The cannibal migration is camped 3 kilometers south of the old feedlot at junction 87. Avoid all structures with livestock, their bait. Remain at least 5 clicks from the riverbed water sources that are booby-trapped with razor wire and decayed fish, designed to trap you. Use alternate corridors marked in the latest bulletin. Stay alert. I switch channels and repeat the message. Jeff M. Shortwave. Any frequency that picks up. I know some won't hear me. Some will be sleeping in hidden bunkers. Some will have radios smashed or batteries dead. And some will choose not to listen. I turn the dial off and step back into the main room. The generator sputters, then steadies. My shadow stretches across the dusty floor. Outside, the wind kicks up again, a whispered warning of the storm to come. There's nowhere to run. The skies have turned traitor, and the earth has become a tomb. But I remain on air, shouting into the void, hoping that the void answers back. Because when the next crisis comes in, it's already here. You'll need a voice that knows the land, knows the dangers, and knows the science of survival. I'll be here, at the edge of everything, fighting to keep the signal alive, fighting to give you a chance to outrun the darkness. And that, in this new world, is a crisis worth fighting for. This is Morgan Reyes, 93.5 FM. Transmission timestamp, 7:42. If you've tuned in, brace yourself, things are about to get worse. The ration box sits empty. I counted the last 2 protein bars this morning under the flicker of my single filament bulb, and both were gone before noon. 1 in my coffee. 1 eaten cold while I tightened the bolts on the generator exhaust. The next shipment of nutritional paste was due 2 days ago. The courier never arrived. Weeks of pedaling have drained the batteries, and I hesitate to drain them further. Each watt I waste is another day off the grid. Water is my deadliest shortage. The well that once supplied this county went dry 6 months ago. I've been trucking in from a distant catchment 5 hours drive across open plains. Diesel costs me half a week's food. Last run, I siphoned 20 liters. Only 15 survived the trip back. The rest leaked through a cracked hose I couldn't fix. I drank 2 of those liters before returning. That leaves 13 liters for my 2-week ration, less than 1 liter per day. I'm below the minimum survival threshold. Food is a cruel, Joke. My pantry holds 75 cans of beans bulk salvage from a collapsed supermarket, but the metal lids are rusted solid. My opener broke trying to pry one off last night. I have a hatchet, but the cacophony of striking tin echoes across the plains like a dinner bell for raiders. Too risky. Fuel dwindles like hope. The last barrel of diesel sits under a tarpaulin in the yard. I dare not use it until the solar cells are patched. I scavenged shards of tempered glass from a smashed storefront to fashion makeshift lenses, hoping to refocus the sun's rays. It works just barely, but I lose half my panels each time a dust storm rakes the surface. With each ticking hour, the environment tightens its grip. The heat this week has climbed like a throttled beast, minus 46 degrees Celsius at dawn, 58 degrees Celsius by midday. The generator shudders when the ambient temperature exceeds 50 degrees Celsius. The oil thins, circuits overheat. I hunch under the shade of a tarred awning during the worst hours, listening to the metal warp. I'm running out of ammunition, too. 10 rounds left in the magazine, plus 6 in the pouch. That's it. Raiders have grown bolder. Skirmishing parties, knocking on my door at night, trying to trade medical supplies for surplus batteries. Medical supplies are non-existent. Batteries are all I have. When they realize I don't have pills, they shove me aside, kick in the fence and stomp my solar panels for sport. Attacks are coming more frequently. Last night at 3:16, I heard the scraping of steel-toed boots across the gravel. My motion, sensor-triggered the light's 2 men, faces masked with ragged cloth, rifling through the scrap pile. They dropped a half-empty water jug and smashed it for fun. I fired a warning shot a single crack that left me with 9 bullets and they scattered like jackals. But their reconnaissance is done. They'll be back, better armed and hungrier. Asterisk through the static on my shortwave. I intercepted a garbled transmission, a woman's voice, soft and urgent, speaking in clipped code. Blue dam, relit. Baseline at grid 42.2 by minus 96.7. Send lumens. It could be nonsense. In this world, rumors are born every hour. But I've plotted the coordinates. They point to the ruins of the Blue Dam Wince, a Midwestern reservoir. Shattered by the first superstorm of 2048, the dam's collapse flooded 100 miles of farmland. But rumor says some remnant lake holds fresh water, shielded by collapsed sluice gates and hidden in the canyon below. If true, that reservoir could reverse the supply chain collapse in this region. Even a trickle 30 liters an hour would. Let me run the transmitter indefinitely. It might save lives, or it might be a trap. Raiders stake out each rumor like wolves, and desperate caravans risk everything chasing ghosts. I replayed the transmission 37 times, slowing the pitch, filtering out noise. I extracted the phrase, send lumens light signals, a beacon. Could someone have repaired the old hydroelectric gen turbine and is calling for power? If I answer, I could light their way or guide predators straight to them. And to me, I've always been cautious. When I was a journalist, I cross-checked sources 3 times before printing. But out here, cross-checking means dying. Trust is a leper's kiss. Spread it carelessly, and you infect your entire community. Hope is a candle in a wind tunnel. It flickers, threatens to snuff out, yet I hold it anyway. Do I chase this lead? My heart says, yes, voice of the storyteller, of the rescuer. My brain says, no, voice of the survivor, the lone wolf. I weigh the factors. Distance, 120 kilometers one way, mostly open terrain, at 30 kilometers per hour on asphalt. 4 hours but half the roads are shattered. I could be on foot. Fuel, 1 barrel yields 200 kilometers, round trip and generator usage at the site barely enough. Ammunition, I'd have to leave the rifle behind, or carry. Only 5 rounds. Water, no extra. I'd be down to less than half a liter per day. I walk to the shed and stare at the barrel. The tarpaulin flaps. I touch its dented side. If someone has lit the dam, they've beaten the desert. They might have fresh produce, medicine, seeds, or their bait. I scribble in my notebook, blue, damn possible source, allocate recon. Then I tear the page out, fold it, and put it in my jacket pocket. It feels like a bullet point in my own funeral oration. Before I can decide, the alarm shrills. 4 Raider trucks, headlights bleeding through the fence slats. I run to the window and see them parked in a semicircle, engines idling. The lead truck's side door swings open, a silhouette against the glare, pointing a rifle at my door. I press the mic button. This is Morgan Reyes. To anyone nearby, microwave repeater is active. Any broadcast you pick up from me is my location. I repeat, this is a trap. 3 trucks peel out. The 4th stays. A lone raider steps forward, grinning beneath his mask. Come out, radio freak, he snarls. We'll trade your signal for water. He doesn't know I've rigged the antenna with a remote cutoff pull, a lever, and the entire mast folds like a dead reed. I step into the booth, flip the switch, and watch the rotor collapse outside. The noise is deafening metal, grinding metal, then a hollow silence. The raider outside curses. I fire my last bullet into the ceiling above him. Not to kill, just to scare. The booth door slams shut behind me, and I lock it. The generators coil, ready to spin again. Asterisk, they hammer the door for hours at least. That's what it feels like. My water rationed to a single mouthful. My heart pounds like a jackhammer. When they finally depart, guns roasting in frustration, open the door. 6 dents, shattered wood splinters. They left me with 1 crate of canned goods beans, corn pastol, with long expired labels. Instead of thanks, they sprayed the cans with grease and set them on fire. Despair claws at me. I kneel by the ash, staring at the twisted metal. I want to scream, to curse the world, to collapse and never rise. But then I think of that transmission, the whisper of water at Blue Diamond. I stand. Asterisk at dawn. I broadcast. This is Morgan Reyes. To anyone at the Blue Dam site, Tiff, you can hear me. I'm coming. I will bring tools, fuel, expertise. If this is not a trap, reply with 5 short blasts on 1,500 kilohertz. If you're hostile, reply with 3 long blasts. That's asterisk. Then I wait. The minutes crawl by. I stare at the static on the screen. My finger hovers over the transmit button. Asterisk, my breath catches. It's exactly the code I sent. Relief is a razor sharp and dizzying. I pack quickly. A toolkit. 3. Spare panels, wiring, cabling, the last gallon of diesel, 5 rounds, 2 liters of water. I seal the door. Leave a note taped to the wall. Gone to Blue Dam. If I do not return, consider the mission failed. I don't know if I'll make it back. I don't know if this is salvation or execution. But I cannot stay here to die a slow death of thirst and despair. Asterisk, my heart bangs against my ribs as I climb into the truck. Each beat asks, are you a fool? You survived this long by keeping your head down. Now you chase a ghost. I grip the wheel. The engine sputters to life. The odometer clicks over. 121. I press the mic. This is Morgan Reyes. If this transmission cuts out, you'll know why. Keep listening. Stay safe. And then I drive toward the unknown. Asterisk resources. Near depletion of water, food, fuel, ammo. Threats. Raiders attack. Fences breached. Supplies destroyed. Mystery. Coded transmission hints at functional water reservoir and power source at Blue Dam. Internal struggle. Battle between righteous hope and pragmatic caution. Decision. Morgan commits to a perilous recon mission. All that remains is a 100-kilometer stretch of wasteland and whatever waits at the end. Static crackle. Then fading hum. This is Morgan Reyes. Signing off, at least for now. Keep your radios tuned. I'll report back. If I can asterisk, this is Morgan Reyes on 93.5 FM timestamp, 5:33. If you're hearing this, something unbelievable has just unfolded and, I need every ear tuned in. I reached the rim of the old blue dam. At dawn, the cracked concrete face stretched before me, a mile of ruin carved into the horizon. Below, in the canyon's throat, lay the remnant lake, not the placid expanse of legend, but a churning, toxic brew, tinged emerald and orange. Steam curled off the surface like phantom smoke. My heart pounded as I unloaded tools, fuel cans, and the last of my water. I crouched at the brink and peered over the lip. At first, I saw nothing but chemical sheen and stripped tree trunks. Then I spotted the pipes. Asterisk rusted intake lines half buried in sediments, naked into the water. Around them, a tangle of cables led to a collapsed powerhouse. I clambered down the steep wall, boots kicking loose stones. Each step echoed with dread. One wrong foot, and I'd tumble hundreds of feet into acid. Inside the powerhouse, I found it, a hydroelectric generator, its rotor wheel, still and inexplicably intact. Panels of shattered glass lay atop its coils, but wires ran from the turbine housing to a makeshift control rack. Beside it, a solar array half scavenged but oriented perfectly toward the rising sun. Someone had strung both systems together in parallel. Hybrid power. A single note was wedged under a greased bolt. To whoever finds this, we kept the lights on. We found a way. The handwriting was looping in precise female. I scanned the room. A handful of empty fuel drums, stacked against a wall. A camp cot draped with a tattered quilt. Jars of filtered water blue as mountain ice. I coughed, taste of metal and memory stinging my throat. Could it be real? A community that tamed the drought. I grabbed the jars and staggered outside. Asterisk, as I filled my bottles, a tremor rolled through the ground. I froze, listening. A deep, resonant rumbling, like anything I'd heard. The earth beneath my feet vibrated. I turned and saw it, a wall of dust, 50 meters tall, roiling toward the canyon's mouth. A supercell downburst, a microburst tornado, spawned by the heat of the dam's sun-bleached concrete, was bearing down on me. I had seconds. I sprinted for the ruined control shack, cradling jars of water. The wind hit like a freight train. I slammed the door behind me and ducked behind. A collapsed desk. The roar swallowed everything. The shack flexed, wood splintering, panels shuddering. I pressed my back to cold concrete and whispered into the mic. This is Morgan Reyes. Unbelievable discovery at Blue Dam Freshwater. Hybrid power. Send. Help. Dust storm incoming. My voice cracked. The glassless window framed a maelstrom. Dust devils spinning like skeletal dancers. Debris whip-cracking through the air. The generator outside groaned as hailstones rock-hard pellet-hammered the turbine housing. Lightning arced across the sky, striking the control shack's metal frame. Sparks danced. I watched in horror as the hybrid wiring caught circuiting in a flash of orange. I leaped up, grabbed my toolkit, and sprinted back into the chaos. My fingers fumbled with pliers as I cut the main line feeding the solar panels. I couldn't save both systems, but I could salvage one. I ripped cables free and ran, ducking under a bent steel beam. A shard of glass sliced my cheek, but I didn't. Stopped outside. Embers floated in the dust like grotesque fireflies. I doused the solar junction box with what little water I had left, just enough to short it, to starve the fire of electrolytic juice. The flames died with a hiss. The turbine whirred. It stored momentum, keeping the generator churning. Within seconds, dials on the control rack sparked to life voltage, stabilizing at 24 V. The lights flickered on, a bare bulb above the powerhouse door, pale and steady. A beacon in the storm. I punched the mic. I have power. I repeat power. Anyone listening, this is a haven. Asterisk, no sooner had the words left my mouth than the ground trembled again in aftershock. The dam's truncated wall had been weakened by the superstorm. Above me, I heard concrete crack, shingle and rebar snapping like twigs. I fled uphill, blood pounding, sweat stinging my eyes. Every step was a question. Do I run straight up the canyon and risk a fall? Do I circle back to my truck and scarper? The dust storm funnel coalesced, a living beast snapping at my heels. I made for the intake tower, half submerged in the sludge below, thinking if the wall came down, the flood surge would blast through here first. I squeezed inside the hollow, shaft wedged between rusted ladders. The roiling wall of debris struck the dam's face with cataclysmic force. I braced against the ladder's rungs as the structure groaned and buckled. Through a small vent, I watched a geyser of brown water erupt hundreds of cubic meters crashing through the breach. The surge rushed past my hideaway like a tidal wave. My ears rang. My fingertips turned white where I clung to steel. In that moment, time fractured. A vision flickered. Ana and Santiago on the front porch, blue sky laughter. Then the dam's roar replaced everything. My knuckles burned. My chest heaved with fear. Suddenly, the rattling stopped. The shaft went silent. I clambered out into a world forever changed. The canyon below was a churning river of mud, water, and debris, cars, machinery, everything swept into a single brown froth. The powerhouse I'd just left lay, half submerged, half destroyed, yet, on the far ridge, a lone solar panel stood, wires still humming. The beacon bulb still glowed. I staggered toward it, boots sloshing through mud. The sun, now visible through a thinning veil of dust, struck the panel, feeding raw power into the control rack. The light blinked once, twice, then held steady. I sank to my knees and pressed the mic. My voice was a whisper. This ... this is real. We have water more than we ever knew. We have power. Blue Dam lives. My mind drifted back to the day I chose to come here to gamble everything on a rumor. Every loss, every scar, every death. Had it all been for this moment, I raised my face to the sun, letting the heat bake away the mud and the fear. I could feel the world breaking all around me, but here beneath that trembling light, there was a chance to rebuild. Asterisk. I thought of the caravans I'd guided, the families I'd warned, the lives I'd failed to save when my batteries died. I thought of the thin thread that still held humanity together, stories, voices in the static, promises broadcast over, empty airwaves. I pressed my palm to the solar panel, as if touching the heart of the world. And I vowed, I will tell this story. I will turn this discovery into salvation. Asterisk. In the hours that followed, the storm broke. The sky became a ragged slate. The air cool and heavy with moisture. Rain fell acid and pocked, but rain nonetheless. I rigged barrels to collect it. The hybrid generator, battered but functional, hummed its triumphant song. I siphoned water from the lake, clearer than anything I'd tasted in years, into every container I could find. I broadcast the coordinates. I described the intact turbine, the solar array, the method to connect both systems, the safety of the canyon ridge. Voices crackled back. Caravans diverted their routes. Scout teams arrived to assess. Survivors began to trickle into the basin, weary and astonished. And then, for the first time in as long as I could remember, I heard laughter over the airwaves. Asterisk. When the dust settled, the canyon was unrecognizable. The surge carved new channels, stripped bark from the hardy pines, and left a ribbon of mud that glistened in the sunrise. But where once lay ruin, now there stands a tent city pitched on the upper terrace's canvas, and corrugated steel, patched with tarps in every color of hope. Caravans arrived at dawn, headlights and horn blasts echoing through the hollow. Faces caked with dust and disbelief. I stood on the rim, holding a mug of hot tea first I've tasted in weeks, watching engineers and scavengers shoulder equipment toward the powerhouse. They're rebuilding the turbine controls, rewiring the hybrid array, and stringing fresh cables down to the riverbank. Each person carries a story of loss. A daughter lost to heat stroke, a brother who vanished during the migration, a father who starved beside an abandoned silo. Yet, as they work, they tell jokes. They offer each other real water, without bartering or fear. Asterisk by midday, the generator back at my outpost hummed with renewed vigor. The jerry-rigged solar panels I'd brought from home now supplement the dam's output, feeding power north to relay stations I abandoned months ago. I flipped switches I'd thought forever dead. Lights blinked on in empty town street lamps, clinic neon signs. The old courthouse clock tower illuminating 12 o'clock. In red numbers for the first time in a decade. Radio traffic surged. This is Phoenix Convoy. We're en route to Blue Dam Station Delta. We've diverted our course. Harvest Collective requesting seed stock and antibiotics. Even the Cannibal militias fell silent on these frequencies, as if they too paused to wonder what this beacon meant. For a moment, the world seemed to stop spinning on the axis of starvation and violence. Asterisk hope came with a price. I lost 2 fuel. Drums clearing the silt from the intake pit's rigid sludge that foamed when exposed to air, poisoning 200 liters of distilled diesel. My left knee cracked under a fallen girder. I'll limp for weeks. And I realized, watching the first supply convoy roll out, this dam's miracle will only last if we protect it. Water rights are weightier than any rifle. I've agreed to stay, on as caretaker, signal operator, part-time engineer, and chronicler. My broadcasts now mix technical bulletins. Expect water flow of 1,200 liters per hour between 6 o'clock to 18 o'clock. Backup aeration systems offline until further notice with stories. Interviews with the first children to swim in clear water again. Hymns sung by exiled priests repurposed as water ritual leaders. Poetry scratched on concrete walls. Asterisk, I never intended to become a hero. I'm just a voice in the static. But as dawn broke on that canyon floor, I understood my story as part of a greater one-base story of humanity refusing to die quietly. I feel changed. The weight of solitude has lifted slightly. The steel bars of fear crack when you see others, sending sparks of kindness your way. Yet I feel the old sorrow lurking beneath my ribs, the memory of Ana and Santiago. Their laughter no longer audible, but living in my heart. I imagine them here, hands splashing in the cool water, faces uplifted. That vision fuels me. I will keep broadcasting until my voice gives out. Tor, until this dam is nothing but rust and memory. Asterisk, the canyon shows signs of healing, but it's a tentative truth. The soil, rehydrated by controlled releases, sprouts, pioneer grasses, and algae mats in shallow pools. Tiny frogs once thought extinct in these parts have been heard calling at dusk. But elsewhere, the landscape remains. A furnace. Wildfires scorch the rim. Heat waves still scorch the plains beyond. The dam is an oasis, not a cure. Engineers have begun experiments in cloud seeding, launching flares into the atmosphere to coax moisture from stained clouds. It's uncertain physics and big gamble, but if successful, we might coax the rains back to the heartland. Already, a scattering of silver iodide flares hiss through the sky at dawn. A new ritual, as sacred as any prayer to God's long-dead asterisk. My nights are now regimented. 2 hours on air, 2 hours sleeping, as before, but my content has shifted. I host panel discussions, live call-ins from camp medics, botanists who've traveled from distant labs, some still running on solar generators and wind turbines, and convoy leaders charting new caravan routes to Blue Dam. We share data, soil pH readings, water quality metrics, battery voltage logs. Knowledge is the new currency. At 21 o'clock each evening, we dim the lights and broadcast silence 2 minutes to honor the dead. Then a single chime rings, and we return to the beat of the generators. It's become a ritual, a heartbeat in the dark. I catch myself smiling at the microphone now. I remember once telling a colonel in the National Guard that storytelling is secondary to survival. I was wrong. Stories built bridges where iron and steel failed. They rallied hands to repair, Turbines sent convoys across snarled roads and coaxed weary hearts back from the brink. I've become both historian and hallelujah singer in this new world. Still, fear remains. Every sunrise brings new challenges. The dam's distribution pipes corrode faster than we can replace them. Raider scouts have been spotted probing the canyon's rim. A fungus is spreading through the replanted grasses, possibly a remnant from tainted floodwaters. We're on a knife's edge between rebirth and relapse. Asterisk, I end each broadcast with the same sign off. This is Morgan Reyes. You are listening to 93.5 FM at Blue Dam. Water flows, power shines. Hold on to each other. The world is still ours to save. Next week, I'll co-host a technical workshop, how to maintain a hydroturbine with scavenged parts. Later, a live Q&A on desalinating brackish wells with solar stills. And on Friday, a commemorative broadcast. 1 year since I first spoke into the static to warn you of the cannibal migration. 1 year since hope almost died. I'd stand at the canyon edge each evening, wind whipping through my hair, listening to the water's distant roar. It's not the same world. I lost my family in less blue, more tainted, hotter than hell itself. But here, at a broken dam reborn, I see the shape of possibility. I see hands reaching out, engines roaring back to life, and the slow green of algae turning brown stone to living earth. The path ahead is perilous, the trials unending, yet we have found a foothold. We have reclaimed one drop of water from the jaws of oblivion, and that small, as it is, everything. Asterisk, I don't pretend. We've won. Blue Dam is standing, its turbines humming in the canyon, but the world beyond these walls still lies in ash and shadows. We've carved out an oasis, yes, but an oasis can be swallowed if we stop tending it. The pipes rust, the fields remain thirsty, and the raiders lurk beyond our floodlights. Hope, I've learned, is fragile as a single jar of clean water in 1,000 miles of dust. It can slip through your fingers as easily as sand, but fragile doesn't mean worthless. Each drop we saved at Blue Dam became a promise that life, however battered, can persist. Tonight, the settlement sleeps under strings of solar lanterns. Children whose parents survived the cannibal migration event run barefoot in mud puddles, shrieking with delight. Their laughter echoes against concrete walls that once stood silent. I hear their delight, and I think of Ana's giggle as she spun in our backyard. Summer air warm and full of promise. That memory used to haunt me. Now it fuels me. I carry on because the water still flows, because those children need clean rivers, because someone must tend the dam and guard its fragile heart. But I carry on, too, because the sky might never clear. The rivers might never fill naturally again, and the old world may never return. We're not rebuilding what was lost. We're forging something new, piecemeal and precarious. Each broadcast I make is a lifeline. When I speak into the mic, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest, time reminding every listener, you are not alone. In the dark, weary hours before dawn, someone out there flips a radio dial, hears my words, and finds the courage to keep walking. I've been there, curled inside the booth, wondering why I'm still spinning these wheels, still pedaling that generator until my legs give out. Then I hear their voices. Station, come in, station, come in. Not for news, but for company. Asterisk, asterisk. Prepare for the future, yes, but brace for its wrath, too. We're mapping the plains for new water caches, experimenting with wind turbines on the ridge, planting hardy grasses in terraced canals that channel seepage from the lake. Tomorrow, I'll lead a team to install second-hand windmills on the canyon lip. They'll catch the west wind we never harnessed before. We'll jerry-rig batteries into a microgrid that lights every tent in the camp. Still, scarcity will follow us. When we can call them, that will bring freezing nights that crack pipes and kill generators. Summers will scorch the panels and blister living flesh. The cannibal bands may learn of our oasis and siege the canyon. They have no allegiance to hope. The world beyond this bubble breathes destruction. And yet tonight I have enough water to wash my face, enough fuel to keep the transmitter humming, enough food to fill my belly. For now, that is victory. So here is my final message, carried on the hum of this old generator. Keep listening. When the storms howl, when the heat bakes your lungs, when the wind carries the distant wail of hunger, turn this way. Tune your dial, lift your voice, and remember, every drop you save, every seed you plant, every story you share is another brick in the foundation of tomorrow. Stay alive, stay human. Let kindness be our ammo, and knowledge our map. The world we knew may be gone, but the world we build is still ours to shape. One broadcast at a time, one spark at a time, we push back the darkness. I don't know what tomorrow holds, only that at dawn, I'll pedal the generator again, filter the water again, speak into the mic again, and in that repetition lies our defiance. This is Morgan Reyes signing off for tonight. May your dreams be gentler than our days, and your hopes stronger than the storms ahead.